David March. Hello, my name is David March. I'm kind of jumped ahead. I haven't done many of these in a while. This is a podcast called I call it the Spy Guy Show. I usually generally talk about intelligence and history of the spy agencies, but I also dab into geopolitics, and I like to hang out with various people I meet on X and other platforms. And one of those people I've met on those various platforms is Adam Zachary Wasserman, who's, I believe this is the first time I actually heard his first name. So tell me a little bit about yourself and where you are and how you're doing.
I'm sure. I'm someone with a pretty eclectic background. I was born in New York, lived there for the early part of my life. Lived out in California for a while. All different places across the U.S. Lived in Canada for another while, then went back and forth between New York and Canada. And most recently, about 5 years ago, I took a business trip from Montreal, Canada, where I was living, to Kansas City. Really loved the social climate in Kansas City, and went back home and said to my wife, "Let's move." I'd been wanting to go back to the U.S. for a while, and so this just seemed like the perfect place to do it. That turned out to be right in the middle of 2020, and so that was an interesting time to move. And so that's one thing. Another thing I could tell you is that I'm pretty much completely autodidactic.
Same here.
High school dropout. I make my living writing computer programs, or actually, well, I used to make my living leading large teams of people that write computer programs. Now I just write them myself, and that's it in a nutshell.
Okay. So how did you get involved in all these X spaces that we're constantly in and meeting people like David S. Libertad and the Prince?
Yes, Prince Michigan. His screen names are nothing if not beautifully what's the word? Beautifully referential to classical literature. How do I get involved in it? Well, I've always made it my business to stay on the bleeding edge of technology. So I was one of the very, very, very first Twitter users.
Oh,
and in fact, I actually was at Wasserman for a very long time, and I gave up at Wasserman because I was. I went on Twitter a couple of times, didn't really understand it, didn't enjoy. It wasn't at the time a very good conversational platform. And I didn't enjoy the lack of coherent conversation. So I spent more time on Facebook doing that. And I forgot about my Twitter handle for quite a long time, until I started to get barraged with hate mail for Debbie Wasserman Schultz. When a sports company called Wasserman Sports offered me a tidy sum for my handle, I transferred it to them, and I became Adam Z. Wasserman. So happily rid of the hate mail. And then ignored Twitter again for another 10, 15 years until Musk bought it. And after Musk bought it, I said, well, let me go check out how it is. By that time, I'd been pretty much completely off of all social media. So what happened is that leading up to the Trump election in 2016, I witnessed this mass psychosis event, and conversation became impossible. Conversation as I knew it, understood it, and remembered it from my childhood became impossible. And so I didn't completely scrub my social media presences, but I pretty much stopped engaging completely in any form of social media in 2016, and went on to do other things. I actually wrote a book, so that was my. Since I couldn't talk to people in conversations, I ended up expressing myself in a book. I wrote a book that summer, and then went on to do other things. So when I came back onto Twitter just to see, I figured it was curiosity. I found that it was really easy to have the kind of heterogeneous discussions and interests that I naturally have. So in other words, I didn't have to lock into a certain special interest group, and I could really engage in a variety of different discussions on Twitter with a variety of different people who shared my variety of different interests. And so I started engaging with people on Twitter, and that's how you met me.
Yep, that's true. I did drop out of high school. I managed to get my grade 13 before, I was like the last class before they abolished it.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I went to college for a couple of years, and that was not for me. And I got into the workforce, and that's where I've been ever since. But I'm kind of like you say, an autodidact. I consume hundreds of books and now videos, and just wanted to get back into it because I had this bizarre conversation. So I don't know if you've ever heard of two-way, Adam.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay,
Yep. I hear them mentioned more often than not. Between Viva and Barnes, they mention them.
Yeah, so they have a very interesting setup. They have a Zoom call that you can call in and do. I thought they were going to charge like a membership, but it's perfectly free for anyone to go to it. But they haven't been using that format as much. They limit to maybe 10 minutes, and it's not as good. But it's created a little community that does a post show where we go and talk. And one of the guys there is this American Ukrainian fan, and he was just like so staggered, and he's in the U.S. military industrial complex, and he was so staggeringly naive. Like, I'm like, look, we know from the NATO Secretary General, the Russians are, according to their stats, they're doing 3-to-1 in vehicle equipment to all of NATO, including the United States, 7-to-1 to munitions. Yet you're trying to tell me you think the Russians are in a meat grinder? Like, is a meat grinder for the Ukrainians? That's pretty obvious. And these guys like, what? But if that's true, that means the entire Five Eyes intelligence community is lying to us. I'm like, of course, that's what happens in warfare. Churchill said it himself. Truth in warfare has to be always surrounded by a bodyguard of lies. And all these old boomers just were losing their top. And I had one person who was more in her 30s, and a couple other people were like, oh yeah, they did lie to us about Afghanistan, they lied to us about Iraq, and they lied to us about COVID, they lied to us about all these things throughout our history. Why are they telling the truth about Ukraine? And I'm like, I just checked the media zonas figures the other day, and it was their estimate which is run by the BBC, and they have their estimated casualties for the Russians about 220,000, which is a lot compared to, say, Vietnam, or super a lot by Iraq. But this is a war that we in the West never thought we would have to fight, other than maybe in the Korea.
Yep. No, but the West, and I don't think it used to be the case with the entire West. I think it used to be an American phenomenon, but I think I can now say that the West in general at this point is a historyless body politic. There's absolutely no awareness or sense of anything past, I don't know, maybe 25, 30 years ago at the most.
Yeah, it's very sad to see. It's just like having written for World War II or earlier periods, and like I was commissioned to write a couple pieces about current affairs stuff for Strategy and Tactics magazine.
Mm-hmm.
I did one article on the Slowicki Gap, and it was so depressing to read, to write, and that I didn't do the second piece on like Polish rearmament. It was just sort of like, guys, we're not prepared for.
I assume when you say that, not everybody's familiar with the writing process. So for me, when you say that, it's because for me, writing is an evolving process that involves a lot of research. And so, you may start off in a certain direction. If you're an intellectually honest writer, you admit that you start off in a certain direction, but then you research and you take in new information as you're writing, and that changes the course of your writing. And I'm assuming that's what you found so depressing, was the new information you were taking in.
Yeah, it was just like the plan for this defensive line is there's 2 brigades. And I'm like, 2 brigades? That's it? You think this is where the Russians are going to, basically, it is the border, this gap is the border between Kaliningrad and Lithuania and Poland and Belarusia. It's about a 60-mile front. These guys are doing like amphibious assaults with rafts with motors, and I'm like, in a drone permissive environment, you're all dead. You guys are still acting like it is the 1990s in Serbia, and we've seen all these videos. It's just like, what is going to happen when some guy with a drone, wire guided by fiber optics cable, comes swinging in at 200 miles an hour and kills your vehicle? Like, what are you going to do?
Well, the most pernicious misguided concept that I've seen in the West since 2019, since this all erupted, is it's a complete and utter constitutional incapability of conceiving of the war in any other terms except for territory.
Yeah.
And as I assume you well know, this has nothing to do with territory.
Yeah, this is an attrition warfare. The Russians, it started out maybe territories, or securing the Donbass region, but at a certain point, the Russians went to an attrition war strategy based on stuff similar to the First World War. And in an attrition war, you have to destroy the enemy army, and then you take the cities. That's like, it's far easier to do that than go house to house, like the Israelis experienced in Gaza. If the Ukrainians are going to oblige us by coming out of the cities and fighting us in trenches, let's do it that way.
Yep. No, it's just staggering to me, and you have more insight than I do, because my contacts, with people working in state organs and institutions is very limited now. But I spent a lot of time wondering, how many people really believed this nonsense versus how many people were just, repeating it out of a sense of duty. But it sounds like you're confirming that a great many of them really believe it.
Yeah, they do. It really is true. Early on, I would say 2 different approaches. So I went to, I think it's 2022, I want to say, maybe 2023. No, it's 2023. It was about a year and a half into the war. And I went to 2 military industrial conferences. The Canadian one I went to first. And I would say, for the most part, the Canadians, military industrial people, they knew what was happening. They were like, but they were so, it was the Canadian war gaming establishment, and it's so new. And so they're trying to get themselves established, and they don't want to, they want to tell leadership what's going on without the leaders getting angry at them, because the leaders believe the same things. Because
that pattern sounds a little familiar to me, because that's what I remember about the Hutu-Tutsi conflict. The Canadian military was well advised of what was about to happen, but was politically hamstrung.
Yeah, exactly. So I was just a teenager at that time, so that was kind of when I was getting into these type of things. But when I went to the Americans, they all believed it. I went to the American a similar conference for Americans. They all believed it. I said to a friend of mine, and I said, we know that based on World War I, both the Austrian-Hungarian Empire and the Turks or the Ottoman Empire had massive mobilization of fresh volunteers, just people willing to go join and fight and die for the empire. Why wouldn't you think the Russians would do that? And my friend looked at me like I had hit him in the face with a cold fish. He was just like, And it's like, this is just, we know this happened then, and those guys are way less like patriotic and organized empires
And
than,
threatened, way
yeah,
less threatened.
yeah, national, much less nationalistic than the Russians.
I mean,
And
the Russians have every reason in the world to feel threatened.
oh yeah, yeah. So, and he just didn't. And he's like, well, but it'll take them 2 years to train that army. Okay, they take 2 years to train the army, and now we're watching that 2 year trained army just demolish Ukraine, like slowly but surely, like the freaking ant story.
Well, there's a lot of just bewildering lack of awareness, common sense, knowledge. It just it emphasizes, I suppose, the danger of information bubbles and homogeneous thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what would you like to talk about there?
Oh gosh, I that's pretty unpredictable. I'm good talking about the Ukraine.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
We always
because I mean, if I start talking about a recent paper I read on set theory and types, it probably wouldn't be the right forum for that.
Yeah, it's fine. It's good to at least get the chance to talk about the Ukraine, because when we go, for those watching at home or will be watching in the future, when we go on a lot of these spaces, a certain other country takes up a lot of time, and it's a small one about the size of New Jersey in the Middle East.
Yeah, although not disconnected historically and currently. So I'll tell you, I'll throw in a little bit of background information that's useful or good to know. So my grandfather grew up in a shtetl outside of Kiev, and one of the things that I remember, him telling me when I was a young child, was that his whole life, pretty much, one army or another was marching through his little town in one direction or another. And so when the hostilities broke out, which I was frankly surprised, because I didn't realize, or maybe even to this day, I would say. So to this day, even, I'm not really sure what extra level of provocation the U.S. and the West hit to trigger the invasion.
I know what the prevailing theory is that when Zelensky said he was going to acquire nuclear weapons at the Munich conference.
Okay, so that makes sense.
Yeah. 2 weeks later, the tanks are rolling.
Okay. I wasn't aware of that, and that was below my radar. And I was always wondering. I mean, the provocation had been going on for so long, and was so steady that I couldn't quite figure out what was triggering it this time.
Yeah, I remember it was around the time I had my birthday party, right before the invasion, and I was like, if the Russians invade Ukraine, it's like the 6th time this year. Like, what the hell?
But what I did say is, or what I did, my background, my childhood prepared me for was, I almost instantly said to myself, well, for 1,000 years, that little patch of land has been the object of a tug of war between first the Polish-Lithuanian Empire, and then the Poles, and then the Russians, with a little smattering of Mongol hordes.
Yeah,
Mongol hordes to spice it.
yeah, I have a great joke actually about the Poland and the Mongol hordes. So a Polish farmer's in the field plowing up, and he pulls up this gas lamp, and he takes it up, and he brass, and he polishes up, and the genie appears, and he says, "Oh, thank you for the genie says, thank you for saving me from my internal prison. For that, I will reward you with 3 wishes." And the Polish farmer thinks to himself, I would like for the Mongols to attack Poland. So the Mongols, and the guy's like, okay. The genie's like, okay. And the Mongols come in, they rampage, they rape, they pillage, they do all that stuff. And then they go back to where they came from. And like the genie says, so what is your second wish? And then he says, oh, I like for the Mongols to attack Poland again. And so once again, the Mongol hordes come into Poland and they do their thing and leave. And the farmer is like, and for my third wish, and the genie's like, hold on. I know what your wish is going to be, sir, but you got to tell me why you're doing this. You keep watching the Mongols.
Oh, I know the answer.
Because they have to go through Russia twice.
That's right. Oh yeah, of course.
That's the
second, but I got it.
Yeah, and that's what so many people, the normies, don't get. That we are dealing with 1,000-year-old blood feud between various parties. Americans left that all behind. That's why they became Americans. They didn't want to deal with that anymore, or Canadians. But these guys still remember.
I never considered myself profoundly Russian in any way until this conflict, and I realized at some very base level, there's so much that makes sense to me without just intuitively or immediately that seems that is clearly escaping. It's that expression, one screen, two movies on one screen, and things like this being a war of attrition, not a war of territory, and things like things like the famous Tucker Carlson Putin interview. It was stunning to me how absolutely zero Western commentators, I don't think I heard a single Western commentator point out two blindingly obvious facts. One, the history is relevant and alive to both the Russians and the Poles and the people in the middle, which we'll talk about, I suppose, eventually. And two, that Putin was conducting the interview in Russian, which is not at all insignificant, because he speaks English quite well. And if he wanted to address the American people, if that's who this interview was targeted at, he certainly would have spoken in English. That interview was not for the benefit of the American people.
No, it was not.
And it's just stunning to me how not a single Western commentator commented on or was even apparently aware of either of these two facts.
Yeah. Well, most of the commentator class has grown up in the CNN, Fox News world, where either you get the CNN world where it's just like one-sided conversations amongst your base, or the Fox world where you have these 10-minute quick fights over anything. And you can get no nuance or anything out of that other than the fact that you have these very short, lively little debates before the commercial break. And in the world of podcasting, what's happened is we can have these long-form conversations in which we can figure out the nuances. It used to be the only place you could go for something like this is Charlie Rose on PBS. And that's just not now we have the ability to, people talk to Joe Rogan for 3 hours and people want to hear what's being said. They're getting exposed to all these ideas while they're working. And it's not coming from, approved sources like the BBC or the CBC or the PBS or whatever people think they should be listening to. So these guys, the intelligence networks who literally used to pay for something like 3/4 of all media outside of the United States through USAID because it was so cheap for them to do it.
I was just about to ask you how you connected this to the partial repeal of Smith-Mundt. So okay, you're answering me.
Yep, they have all this, so they've done that. So what they've done instead, now they've lost their ability to through the narrow silo. They flood the zone with false information, so people don't know what to believe.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. It's the effectiveness and the extent of the brainwashing is impressive to behold.
Yeah.
And of course, like any American, I get to witness it close up and personal with friends and relatives.
Mm-hmm.
Just immediate post-hypnotic triggers, post-hypnotic suggestion triggering. The person goes away behind the eyes, and the person is replaced with programming.
Yeah, pretty much. No, and I might have been not exactly one of those type of people that were post-hypnotic triggered people, but definitely I was before COVID a much more mainstream, mainline conservative, much like I would put myself around Frederick Hayek. So I was not in mainline, but I was like, I was on the extreme edge of the allowable opinion. And then they locked me up in my condo for 2 years and made me do nothing but think. And now here I am having a conversation with you.
I was a absolutely unremarkable garden variety New York liberal. I mean, part of the problem is with the labels now. I mean, the labels have become meaningless. Liberal is considered on an axis opposed to conservative, which it isn't at all, because I was also conservative.
Yeah.
The opposite of a liberal is a collectivist.
Right.
Only they've destroyed all these meanings.
Mm-hmm.
The opposite of conservative is a progressive. We have these, what once used to be terminology with actual meanings, semantic meanings that illustrated or indicated actual philosophical positions or tendencies, are now replaced with these catch-all epithets that really basically only mean somebody awful.
Mm-hmm.
I was a completely garden variety New York liberal and also conservative.
Yep.
Not in favor of rapid or dramatic change. And
we had in Canada at one time the Liberal Conservative Party that ruled for like 50 or 60 years.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense to me, right?
Yeah.
and that's for me. It was the 2016 election. I immediately the overnight abandonment of all journalistic standards was shocking to me. As a good New York liberal, the fact that suddenly single-sourced anonymous, single anonymous sources became journalistically acceptable overnight was, for me and my intellectual tower, shocking. I was speechless. Still am, as you can see, still am a little speechless over that. Mostly I navigate public. I navigate polite society these days by countering, Trump derangement syndrome with history. So if somebody starts ranting and raving to me about the loss of civil liberties, I just say, yeah, I knew it was over back when Bush Sr. was elected and protest was limited to free speech zones and not a single person or media squawked about it.
Yeah.
So this is my, I go back in time, because I don't want to have the conversation. I don't want to have a conversation with a robot.
Yeah, no, I was definitely having that at my church a few weeks ago, where people they're like, I can't believe anyone would be conservative. That was my priest saying that, and I'm like, well, I just happen to remember that in the 2000s with George W. Bush, they were all calling him Hitler and everything that. And then a few years ago, I was on Twitter and Occupy Democrats was singing the praises of George W. Bush. And one of the other guys at the table was like, yeah, I remember thinking that George W. Bush was the Antichrist.
Yep. Well,
right.
we may live to see the same thing. We may live to see Trump recognized as the greatest American president of all time.
Yep. And
We're young enough that we might live to see that.
yep, we could be seeing that. I don't think so. I think he's more the change agent, and that someone like Vance might be the guy who actually completes the deal. But
Maybe.
we'll probably call it the Trumpian age if otherwise.
I'm curious to see how the future turns out.
Mm-hmm.
But if the past is any indication of the future, he will become a beloved figure, just like all the other Hitlers became.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And there'll be, and I said, and I think that if maybe it's JD Vance, maybe it's someone else, some future Republican president, all these liberals will be on TV, or all these people will be on TV saying, this guy is literally Hitler, but remember Trump? We could still make a deal with that guy.
Yeah. It's coming. It's coming. It's coming. It's coming just as surely as that there will be a day when people who gleefully celebrated the possible death of unvaccinated patients will deny that they ever said such a thing or ever thought such a thing. Yeah. It's coming.
Oh yeah. So what do you make of all what's going on because of this? What do you think is causing this problem? Is it just creation of all the psyops, or is it something bigger?
Well, first of all, I'll say that I guess because of my background or personal inclination, I take a longer term view of this than most people do. And with the longer term view comes the recognition that I was born and grew up. So I was born in the early 60s, very early 60s. And I grew up, in New York in the early 60s. And I would say that I probably experienced the absolute pinnacle of Western liberal society. And but with the larger perspective, there's no reason to believe that pinnacle would last or get any better. If you look at the larger context of human history, it leads you to the Lockean view, right?
Yep.
Nasty, brutal, and short. And so the question isn't why are things getting worse? That's the wrong question to ask. The question would be, how did things get better? So what did we do in the 50s and 60s that we stopped doing? That might be the question.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm much more in the fourth turning type of view point. Every bad time you get you have the greatest generation, and you have the silence who the greatest generation makes everything. The silences improve upon things. The boomers squander, and then the last generation gets to pick up the pieces and start it over again.
Yeah, I'm not against that point of view, but it's that cyclical point of view. But it's not my primary frame of reference. My primary frame of reference is also, I guess, I'm also maybe ultra American, having been born in the U.S. in the early 60s, and so and what I mean by ultra American is that I believe that the key intent, that the number one focus of the American founders was to mitigate tyranny.
Right.
And I use the word mitigate, not eliminate, right?
Yeah. They understood you were going to get it. You just want to make it the least amount possible.
Yeah. And so from that ultra-American point of view, the hidden assumption there, the water that we fish are swimming in, is that tyranny is unavoidable. Tyranny is an aspect of human nature which can, at very best, be mitigated.
Well, I would say at that time, that is the start of the imperial presidency, where Congress and Senate abrogate their responsibilities and just let it go, all flow into the presidency.
Yeah, I used to be very sort of up in arms about that. But I was also relatively uninformed about, the actual article powers. I think and I'm not studying it intensively or anything, but the more I absorb new information about the different article powers, the enumerated powers granted, the more I appreciate that Congress has not necessarily really been abrogating anything. Um, Congress and the executive have different purposes and objectives, and I think I wasn't. I'll say I wasn't as clear on this at the time that I felt that Congress was abrogating their responsibility. I was not as clear on the separation of powers as I am now. I'll say that.
Okay.
And the need. I won't talk about an unbounded executive. I think that that's not right. But especially considering that the foundation of the U.S. Constitution is enumerated authorities, right? That belies any concept of unbounded right there.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say that I'll say this. Here's what I'll say. I think that the innovation of the founders of the American Constitution was that the most effective strategy to mitigate tyranny would be to pit putative tyrants against each other.
Mm-hmm.
And obtain some sort of balance of power and some sort of moderation, based on creating where none used to exist. So tyranny used to be a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
I believe that the American Constitution made tyranny a collective effort, which would be naturally moderated by internal oppositions within the tyrannical class. All right.
Right.
I don't know if I'm making sense. It's something I hardly ever talk about.
Okay.
So I don't know if I'm making a lot of sense.
I think so. I mean, like the idea is that you got to get all these different. You got to get a lot of different factions together to make the tyranny work. And if some of the factions break away, you don't have a tyranny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also that the best way to keep a putative tyrant, in other words, a powerful person, in check, is to stack the deck in favor of other powerful people who agree to work together more or less harmoniously.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I always say it's a mitigation of tyranny. It's the replacement of a tyrant, the avoidance of the tyranny of democracy, and trying to find some middle path where there's some where each powerful potential tyrant has ample motivation to prevent to retain the balance of power and to not personally attempt to get it all for themselves, and to not allow one of the other ones to try and get it all for themselves.
Right.
And so back to your original question of where do I trace this back to? In that framework, what I would say is that constitutional framework did not consider the existence of a permanent bureaucratic class.
Right.
And the permanent bureaucratic class has no such motivation. It's not built into the Constitution. There is no check and balance for it. Mm-hmm. And it saw an opportunity for tyranny and went for it.
Yep.
And I'm grateful that
well, we seem to have lost him. Hopefully he comes back on in 5-10 minutes. I'll give him 5 minutes. Before that, I think he might have hit the wrong button or what happened there. Oh, here we go. This is it's not space. I got a bunch of messages here. It's an intro. And you can join. And hopefully, when I turn back the screen here, I will be able to. Oh, here he is back. Hey,
yeah, sorry about
that.
I didn't realize that by trying to reply to David, I would kick myself out.
Okay. Yeah, I noticed that the two, that Donnie and him are in the chat. I just messaged them saying, just join the link and you can join the show. I'll run it a little later for them if
there we are. I was about to say that I'm glad that the permanent bureaucracy made their move when they did. Because I think it was before the power was consolidated absolutely enough to succeed. I think that had there been more patience, we might have been in a more dire circumstance than we're in right now.
Yeah, that's sort of my looking at like Bill Barr when he got appointed and he got in there and he's like a real deep state bureaucratic machine guy. And he's like, holy crap, what did you guys do? Why are you messing with our good thing? I think that's really the way to look at Bill Barr. He was trying to fix things because people under Obama got so way out of control. And started like people like Comey and Brenner were just so way over the skis. They're like, we have a nice little, like a mafia don coming in and saying, we have a nice little thing going on here. Why are you putting it in jeopardy by starting a war?
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, although that does, again, from a historical perspective, that's the historical pattern, is that the tyrant eventually oversteps and the rabble, there's, the power always resides in the rabble, ultimately.
Yeah, I'm just typing him away there.
When the rabble has nothing left to lose, they have nothing left to lose. The success of Western internal tyranny is predicated in large part on maintaining a comfortable standard of living.
Right.
So
yeah, and that's their other problem. It's also throughout history we see this where kingdoms get born, they get a food surplus, they create a priest class, which is similar to the bureaucratic state. Mm-hmm. And then there's a crop failure, and those are the first people to go because they can't appease the gods to make the food grow again, and the civilization goes through a revolution, a war, or a complete and utter collapse. But with the creation of the steam engine and the Industrial Revolution, we finally.
You're going to trigger me. You're going to get me started.
I don't know. We have this permanent food surplus that has allowed us to basically do this.
Well, you're going to get me started because the Industrial Revolution is one of my personal rabbit holes. And,
okay.
And I'm otake level into it, and one of my things is that there's a deep misunderstanding amongst historians and the general populace as to what exactly happened during the Industrial Revolution, and the too long didn't read is whatever happened during the Industrial Revolution, it was not a massive increase in productivity. That came later and for different reasons.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I'd be happy to go into it. Trust me, I could go for days on that.
Oh, okay.
That book is about that.
Okay.
Which I wrote.
Oh, okay. What is the book that you wrote? What's it called?
It's called the Chaos Factory. Here's my little blurb.
Okay, there you go.
And it's a book about applying industrial production methods to software application development. And this is the prime example of what I was talking about earlier. When I started writing that book, I thought I understood what industrial production methods were. And when I finished writing the book, I realized I knew nothing and everyone was wrong. So there you go. It's a very rarefied. Did you know that there are industrial archaeologists?
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and then so they run around picking up bits of metal and examining tool marks under microscopes to figure out when this particular bit of metal was machined and who did it. And
yeah, we have here where I live in Hamilton, Ontario, we have the Steam Technology Museum, and for decades they were like it was just sitting there not being used. It was like it's basically a giant pump station that was made in the 19th century to fill to give everyone where everyone's clean drinking water was coming from. And they were thinking of knocking it down, and then someone said, "You know what? This is the only one of these left in North America. Do we want to knock it down?"
I actually I met a guy when I was a much younger man. So this was in the 80s. I met a guy who out in eastern townships of Quebec who still had an operational Stanley steamer.
Yep. What for those
which for the uninitiated is a gigantic car, a gigantic steam-powered car that can go 100 miles an hour.
Wow.
Yeah.
I never knew that they got up to that.
Oh, it's
that fast.
Incredible. Yeah. Looks a little bit like Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
Yeah, that's what I thought it would. I've definitely seen pictures of the steam-powered cars, but they're just not as practical as gasoline engine cars, from what I can tell.
Yeah, well, there's the warm-up period amongst them.
Well, we've been talking about, as I said, for about an hour now, and we had 2 consistent viewers. That's a good thing for a show like this. I had
nice.
20 views yesterday, and like I do have 500 subscribers, and I'm hoping to grow more. And by doing stuff like this and doing, like I said, I have a bunch of books that I'm planning on getting into on intelligence and that. So it's been great to meet you here, Wasserman. But I do have
if you want to send me some subject in particular to discuss, I'd be happy to read it over and then we can discuss. And also, I didn't even think about this when we started our conversation, but I'd be interested in discussing that draft paper that I circulated in our little chat group.
Oh yeah, definitely. That was something that I thought we could get into, so we can
another time we'll do it. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll be sure to get and read it a bit more than just this cursory glance I gave it, and we can definitely get together. When's the next best time for you?
I'll circulate another draft because I realized leaving out South America was stupid. I mean, at this point, I might as well throw South America in as well. So I'm doing a last little touch up, adding South America, and then I'll shoot it back out. I'm pretty easygoing time wise. I'm mostly in control of my schedule, and I am mostly free at this time of day every day.
Okay.
So, with some occasional blackout periods, but yeah.
Like anyone, like Christmas holidays and stuff.
Yeah, okay. Anytime.
Okay, well, I'll definitely reach out.
Well, thank you very much for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Anyways, if you're watching this, like, share, subscribe, and let's try to get us up to 1,000 and see where we go from there. And yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.